How are the defending national champion Indiana Hoosiers going to do in 2026? Who would have thought that would be a statement that we said at this point a year ago? Indiana had a phenomenal year last year, going 16 and 0, winning the national championship. And our predictions were just a little bit different than that. We had them going 9 and 3. Didn't necessarily expect that, but it was kind of fair looking at their schedule with losses to I think it was Oregon and Penn State, and then we just had one other one in there. Um, Overall, I mean, obviously Indiana did a lot better than we expected last season, but we still knew that they had that potential in them. Kurt Signetti is an insane human being, and he was able to turn this program around real fast. And I think that they're continuing in the right direction because when you look at what they've done this offseason, I feel like they've done a phenomenal job all around.
And it starts off with the returners they have coming back on offense and defense. Now, offensively, it's going to be a little interesting because you are losing your Heisman winning quarterback in Fernando Mendoza, who's likely to be the number one overall pick in the NFL draft. You're losing two of your starting wide receivers. You're losing both the running backs that you utilized. And then you're also losing Pat Coogan, your starting center, who is an All American and one of the best offensive linemen in college football this past year. But starters returning, though, you have one wide receiver coming back who made some of the biggest plays during their postseason run in Charlie Becker. And then you also have four offensive linemen, including Carter Smith, their starting left tackle, who had a decision to make whether to go to the NFL draft or not, and ultimately decided to stay with the Hoosiers. And that's going to be huge because with Josh Hoover coming in as their starting quarterback for the transfer portal, that's going to be a huge addition or a huge help to have such a veteran offensive line to protect your quarterback. And then defensively, the biggest concern is the fact that they're losing both of their starting linebackers who made up probably the best linebacker core in college football last season, led by Aiden Fisher, as well as D'Angelo Pons, who was a phenomenal cornerback, as well as Lewis Moore, who was one of their starting safeties, including Stephen Daly on their defensive line as well. But they still have six starters coming back, and they have some guys already on the roster that they are expecting to fill some of those positions, particularly in that linebacker department. But overall, it's still going to be a very solid returning roster for a team that just won a national championship. Now, recruiting wise, high school recruiting ranking in at number 33, which, is kind of to be expected considering Indiana has just made such a quick turnaround. They're still not on a level of like brand wise as your big programs like Ohio State, LSU, Notre Dame, Georgia, Alabama, so on and so forth. But they're starting to climb up those rankings a little bit. And then transfer portal coming in at number 8. This is where Kurt Signetti has made his money the last couple seasons, and this is where he'll make his money once again. Overall coming at number 21, but that's no surprise. Indiana was the underdogs last year with not having that many like highly talented star-wise recruits or players on their team, and that led to a national championship. And I think the additions they have to this team could make it very easy for them to possibly go back to back. Obviously, I mentioned Josh Hoover coming in to be their starting quarterback. We've been very high on Josh Hoover the last couple seasons. He was a gunslinger at TCU, and I think he's going to be a perfect fit in this Hoosiers offense. They also got Nick Marsh from Michigan State, who was phenomenal his freshman year and was kind of held back by quarterback play last season when Michigan State was just downright awful. They also bring in AJ Harris to help out in that cornerback room after losing some of their star corners. And then Turbo Richard is going to be their new running back from Boston College. I do think that he'll have to make an impact considering that they don't really have a better alternative at this point. But behind an offensive line like that, I think that they will have a phenomenal offense once again that will be one of the best in the country. Now, grades wise, talent. I mean, this is an A. You are getting some of the best players in college football to come to your program. And who would have thought you would have said that a couple of years ago about Indiana football? And then needs wise, also going to be an A. We're going to get a little picky as we get through these grades. And the reasoning for it not being an A plus, considering the fact that they did meet most of their needs, is they didn't get a linebacker in the portal, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but when you are losing two linebackers of that caliber, I'm just a little shocked you didn't go out and get someone that was in the transfer portal. For example, like Rasheem Biles, who ended up at Texas and was a highly sought after linebacker out of Pitt. But again, you're not really going to see me complaining too much about that. Overall, this is an A, and this is a phenomenal start to their offseason as they look to defend their national title from this past year.
Now looking at their schedule, the non-conference, to be honest, is pathetically easy, just like it was last season. They're going to start 3-0. And then you got Northwestern at home to start Big Ten play. And I think this is going to be honestly not too terrible. I think Northwestern will be solid. They're bringing in Aiden Childs from Michigan State. Michigan State did not do very well last year. Childs has struggled with turnovers his past 2 seasons. I feel like that's something Indiana will be able to take advantage of if they get this win at home. Then you move on to back-to-back road games, Rutgers and Nebraska. Rutgers is led by Greg Schiano, and they have, to be honest, somewhat outperformed the past couple seasons, although still having losing records just because their schedule's been so tough. I feel like Rutgers is nowhere near the level of Indiana. They brought in Dylan Lonergan from Boston College to be their starting quarterback, just not even close to the level of talent that Indiana has with Josh Hoover. So that'll be another Hoosier win. And then Nebraska, losing Dylan Raiola. He would rather be the backup quarterback at Oregon than to be the starter at Nebraska. That's how far Nebraska has fallen. And I think that, to be honest, they're going to have another relatively rough season. No shot that they beat Indiana here. Even though it's a little bit of a trap game and it'll surely be a sellout, I still don't think that Indiana loses this game.
But then you come to probably the toughest two-game stretch for any team going into 2026. You have a rematch with Ohio State at home, though. But this Ohio State team is going to be out for blood after losing that Big Ten championship game, after finally getting back there after being kicked out essentially by Michigan the last 4 years. And this is going to be honestly probably the game of the year for the Big Ten because both these teams are going to be stacked with talent. I really don't see how this game will end up being a blowout either way, whether it's an Ohio State blowout win on the road or an Indiana blowout win at home. But both these teams have great quarterbacks with Josh Hoover and Julian Sayin. The wide receiver weapons, maybe it's leaning a little bit in favor of Ohio State, but defensively, Indiana is going to be just as good as they were last year, returning just a little bit more production on that side of the ball compared to Ohio State. This is going to be an absolute classic, but right now we can't have it any higher than a coin toss for both these teams. It's just way too early to tell between these two. And then right after that, they go on the road to the Big House to take on Michigan, who has completely revamped their coaching staff, bringing in former Utah coach Kyle Whittingham. And I think he's going to be the key for this program in unlocking Bryce Underwood while he is a Michigan Wolverine. Because I think after last year with Devin Dampier, Whittingham can implement some things that he used with Dampier to unlock the full talent and full potential of Bryce Underwood because I think they have lots of similarities. And I think this is also going to be the best possible surrounding cast, supporting cast for Underwood offensively. And then on defense, it's a Michigan defense. Year after year, they have one of the best defenses in the country, even if it's not going to be on par with some of like the top five. You never want to face this big, physical, strong Michigan defense. I really could see Michigan pulling off this upset, but it's hard to count out Kurt Cignetti and this Indiana team. We're gonna have them slightly favored as of right now, but I mean this is going to be a road trip for them, so maybe Michigan can pull off the upset after another emotional game against Ohio State for Indiana. So who knows? But this is going to be a tough two-game stretch for them. After that, though, they take on Minnesota, and I think this is going to be a lot easier for them. Obviously, you still have Drake Lindsey returning for the Golden Gophers, and that continuity is going to help Minnesota kind of have a competitive year. But at home for the Hoosiers, the talent disparity between these two teams is too large, and I think the Hoosiers should cruise in this one. Then they get a bye week before a matchup against USC, and I think USC can be fairly good this year with Jaden Mayava as their starting quarterback, but losing a good amount of that wide receiver room to the NFL draft might take some getting used to. But obviously, USC is a big destination for wide receivers, has been for the last few years. And defensively, they have made some improvements over the last couple of years as well. So this is no game to kind of push over, but I do think that the defense the Hoosiers have will be able to limit anything at this point that USC has. But again, this is just way too early for us to really tell what's going to happen. But we're going to favor the home team here because USC does have quite a ways to go. Then they're
And
on
then
the
it's
road.
a road trip to Washington. And I think the Huskies are going to be a solid team next season. You have Demond Williams returning at quarterback, and he's going to be, I think, pretty solid, but there's somewhat of a question as to whether or not he's going to be fully committed to this Washington team, given that he tried to transfer and they basically forced him to come back. Wide receiver is also a little bit of a question mark. They do have a freshman guy who had a breakout season. He'll be back. Other than that, didn't necessarily fill it super well with the transfer portal. So I'm a little bit concerned about this Washington offense, which is one thing that leads me to Indiana here. Just overall, there's also a talent gap. I think that Washington will be able to get this win. Sorry, Indiana will be able to get this win on the road against Washington. The Huskies, they could pull off the upset. I just think it's very unlikely at this point in the season. And then you have Purdue at home, rivalry game. I mean, Indiana's just a lot better than Purdue now. It's really not much of a rivalry at this point just because the Hoosiers, they're not going to lose this game. They blew them out of the water last season on the road. I fully expect the same thing to happen this year, which moves us on to our official projections. Last year, like we said, undefeated national champions. Our win total for this season, 9.5 wins. So projecting between 2 and 3 losses, that's kind of understandable. You have Ohio State and then at Michigan. That's a really tough 2 game stretch. USC is not going to be easy. Washington's not going to be easy. I can definitely see Indiana going, 9-3, but more realistically, I think it'll be 10-2, probably losing to Ohio State and Michigan back to back. That's just a really, really tough stretch. And those are two of the best teams in the country, in our opinion. I do believe that Indiana will finish the year 10-2. Their national championship odds, though, are tied for third place at plus 700. So, still a really good shot in our mind and in Vegas's mind for Indiana to make the college football playoffs and have a good shot at the national title. This team definitely has the talent to do it. 10-2 probably is good enough to get them into the college football playoffs. I think they'll have enough solid wins on their resume to do it. And once they get there, experience is definitely key. The Hoosiers have a lot of that on this roster. If they get the right path, they absolutely could make a run once again. So, thank you guys for watching. Please make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you in our next video.